Yesterday on the channel, I reviewed the Andrew Tate comic book that's been setting the internet ablaze. Of course, the big talking points about this was it was a $100 comic book. It was 32 pages, and the quality of it was not up to professional standards from what we've been seeing. So we're like, wow, this is crazy. Now, what's interesting about this is I'm not here to like redouble down on talking about the comic. We've done that. We've given the review. If you want to watch that, it is on the channel. I posted it yesterday. The review is called Top G, Andrew Tate's $100 comic, honest review by a pro comic writer. Now, if you are not familiar with me, I've written 12 graphic novels and a bunch of single issues on top of this over the last several years. I am an indie comic creator who is, of course, making a living at doing this, so I know what I'm talking about on both the art level and the writing level. So I gave a really honest review. I savaged this book. And what's interesting is DNG Comics, who's producing this comics, actually reached out to me and talked to me after this. Now, this is interesting, and I actually want to give major props to DNG Comics. I think this is huge. I think this is a professional courtesy that's above and beyond for their customers and, of course, for a fellow professional. And I think that they really are exemplifying how the industry should treat criticism. Now, of course, there's all sorts of criticism. There are people who don't like things. There's people who do like things. I've had people who love my books, who don't like my books. There's, you take things with a grain of salt. And of course, you always try to take the people who are in good faith, who are actually people who want to support you with their criticisms at a higher value than, of course, the detractors who are just trying to go after you. We've seen a lot of that with Eric July, with people, no matter what he does, they are just going to go at him 100%. And I know Andrew Tate has a lot of that too. I have a lot of it myself, so I'm completely understanding on that level. But I'm not a person who's like trying to gotcha Andrew Tate or anything like that. So I have young boys, and they actually really love his content. And so, of course, I'm favorable towards a lot of his content him myself. This comic book was not up to my standards as a comic professional, but that is where it's at. So DNG Comics is this company. They reach out to me and they talk to me. And this is what the mainstream industry never does. And I'm going to get to Heather Antos, which I promised in the title, in a moment. But if you look at this, they actually messaged me yesterday. And I'm not going to show the DMs, but they did give me permission to talk about it. They said they had watched. It was honest as promise. And he says, we're coming with a completely different level book 2. This is great. And this is exactly what I said at the end of my video. If book 2 is looking better, I'm going to report on it as so. I am a comic book reporter and journalist as much as I am a professional. I work for Bounding Into Comics as well as here. And so this is great news. Then he tells me, keep up the good fight and don't be a stranger. So even though I completely savaged this book, and I was vicious in this review, if you haven't watched it, he told me to keep up the good fight and don't be a stranger. This is a nice, professional, courteous reply to criticism. This is exactly how professionals should act when there's criticism. Now, the media is set up like this. You have these comic book resources and Newsarama to where no matter what they do, they are paid to get access to Marvel and DC. So all they do is suck off Marvel and DC and tell them how great they are over and over and over again so they can continue getting those interview accesses. They'll never tell them when there's something wrong. They'll never tell them when there's something bad. Even when the sales are just absolutely atrocious and destroyed, like Tom Taylor's Superman, they all pretend like the sales are going great. I'm doing okay on Amazon. I looked that up and I debunked that in a video too. It's crazy how these people act and try to put themselves into their own bubbles where they're pretending like the comic industry is not failing. We all know it is. Even Mark Millar said it is. Most recently, Mark Millar is one of the best writers out there in comics. If anybody knows, he knows. So this is where they're at. And of course, whenever there's any sort of criticism, they go ballistic from Marvel and DC, the Heather Antos camps. They claim it's harassment. They claim it's toxic fandom. They claim the fans are the problem. It's like that Simpsons meme from the old cartoon. It's not me, it's the children, right? That's exactly how they act with things. So you contrast how DNG here talked about things. And here he is. And he says... he said in terms of my reviews that he understands. He says, keep your integrity. I hope you enjoyed it and like the second book more. I hope your experience with the brand is also positive. Look at that. I mean, that's really nice. Now, I criticized Heather Antos back in 2022. I had picked up a new Star Trek comic from the Star Trek line. I had not picked up one of her Star Trek comics yet because I try not to support people who hate me as best as possible. And gosh, she really hates me. But here is a comic where, like, she put this issue together, and there's glaring continuity errors across 22 pages. There's points where it's not even Star Trek. There's people firing regular guns rather than phasers in the 24th century. It just doesn't make any sense. That's not how Star Trek works. And so, like, these glaring errors were in here, and I detailed it in this article here, and that's really when Heather Antos came to my attention for the most part. And since that point, she makes passive-aggressive comments about me on Twitter. She's like, she sends messages calling me nasty things and all that. And of course, then with San Diego Comic Con, she called security on me just for showing up as a journalist. I had a press pass, was covering the Comic Con, and of course she's a person of interest for comic books. Of course, she's made herself that way. I've never heard of an editor doing a signing before, because most editors are not really the creatives of the book. Usually they send out the artists and writers for these things, but she actually is the one doing the signing, like it was her book and not the person who wrote it last weekend. So she's made herself into a celebrity in order to keep her job, keep her influence, and things like that. Therefore, she is a public persona of interest as a journalist. I hate having to describe this. It should be obvious. But the amount of vitriol that I've gotten from her colleagues in the industry, just because I report on what's going on with this situation, is just a stark contrast to what Andrew Tate and DNG is doing. Andrew Tate and DNG, I didn't like the book, but guess what? Their customer service, their company is on par. These are amazing people who are doing great work on that level, and they're saying they're going to up their game. Now, if they do up their game, I love it. If they don't, that sucks. But here it is. At least they are listening to their customers and trying to be better. I try to do this too. I try to cater to what you guys want for the books. I try to listen and do things on the level that you want. And I hope that every book improves and looks way better than the last to you guys every time we come out. And so far, you guys have told me that it's been the case on that level. Now, contrast this to the mainstream media. They just double down. They just produce more and more crap. They make it even worse. And they try to take pride in the fact that they're actually destroying their own brands. It's very bizarre. But that's exactly why we're here calling this out to begin with, because they hated us as customers. They said, we don't want you. You're not allowed in these spaces. And as much as I say, you know what, I'm not budging, at the same time, they need to respect us and they need to treat us right. And that's exactly what DNG Comics, who's running the Andrew Tate book, is doing. So kudos to them. I really appreciate those messages. I think that's great work there. And I hope they keep fighting the good fight also. Leave a comment down below with what you think about this. Hit that like and subscribe button. We'll be back soon.